The ultimatum. The Grand Assembly Hall. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stepped through the massive crystalline doors of the Grand Galactic Council chamber. The structure towered above her like a cathedral made of living light, its walls pulsing with soft colors that seemed to respond to the emotions of those within. Elena had studied this place for years, but seeing it in person still took her breath away. This was where the fate of entire civilizations was decided. Elena wore a simple black diplomatic suit, her silver hair pulled back in a professional bun. At 45, she had negotiated treaties across human space, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Behind her walked Captain Marcus Chen, his military dress uniform crisp and perfectly pressed. His hand rested casually near his sidearm, though they both knew weapons would be useless here. The third member of their delegation was Dr. Sarah Kim, a young xenobiologist whose job was to observe and record everything for Earth's leadership. The chamber itself was breathtaking. 7 different sections surrounded the central speaking area, each designed for a different alien species. The air hummed with translation devices and the quiet murmur of a dozen different languages. Elena could feel hundreds of eyes watching her as she walked to the human delegation's assigned spot. The 7 Species Alliance. High Chancellor Vex of the Moravian Empire stood first. His species looked like upright wolves, covered in silver fur that gleamed under the chamber's lights, his yellow eyes fixed on Elena with obvious disdain. The Moravians had been expanding their territory for centuries and saw humans as dangerous competitors. Human representative, Vex growled, his voice carrying across the chamber without amplification. We have called this assembly to address the crisis your species has created. In less than 3 centuries, you have spread across the galaxy like a plague, claiming worlds and resources that rightfully belong to established civilizations. Elena remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back. She had expected this opening. The aliens saw human expansion as aggressive, but Elena knew the truth was more complex. Humans had colonized empty worlds, trading fairly with existing species and avoiding conflict whenever possible. Next to speak was Matriarch Zara of the Hylian Collective. Her species resembled giant praying mantises, their bodies covered in shimmering scales that changed color with their moods. Currently, Zara's scales showed deep red, indicating anger or aggression. The human growth rate is unprecedented. Zara clicked, her voice like breaking glass. Your population doubles every generation. Your ships fill the space lanes. Your colonies consume resources at rates that threaten the galactic ecosystem. This cannot continue. Elena listened without interruption. The third speaker was Commander Thole of the Rigid Union, a species that looked like walking crystals. His body was translucent blue, with light patterns flowing through his form as he spoke. The 7 Species Alliance has spent months developing a solution to the human problem, Thole announced, his voice ringing like struck metal. These terms are generous, considering we have the power to simply eliminate your species entirely. The impossible terms. Dr. Kim activated her recording device as the aliens began listing their demands. Elena knew every word would be analyzed by Earth's leadership, but she also knew her response had already been decided. First, announced Vex, humanity must immediately surrender control of 70% of your current colonies. You may retain only the worlds within 20 light years of your home system. All other human settlements will be evacuated within 1 standard year. Elena calculated quickly in her head. This would mean abandoning over 400 worlds and displacing nearly 2 billion humans. Many of these colonies had been established for generations. Families had built entire lives on these worlds. Second, continued Matriarch Zara, all human population growth must be limited by galactic law. No human world may exceed 50 million inhabitants. No new colonies may be established without unanimous approval from the 7 Species Alliance. Captain Chen shifted slightly beside Elena, but his expression remained neutral. Elena knew what he was thinking. Limiting human population growth was like trying to contain a star's nuclear fusion. It went against everything that made humans who they were. Third, announced Commander Thole, human military forces must be reduced by 85%. The remaining ships and personnel will be subject to Alliance oversight and inspection. No human vessel may carry weapons capable of threatening Alliance ships. This demand was perhaps the most insulting. The aliens were asking humanity to become completely defenseless, dependent on their protection. Elena had seen what happened to species that trusted the Alliance's protection. They became puppet states, their resources slowly drained away. Fourth, and finally, said a new voice. Supreme Coordinator Nix of the Phantom Syndicate materialized from what had appeared to be empty air. His species could become invisible at will, which made them excellent spies and assassins. Humanity must pay reparations for the disruption your expansion has caused to galactic civilization. The amount equals the total economic output of all human worlds for the next 50 years. The stunned silence. The chamber fell completely silent. Elena could hear her own heartbeat in the stillness. Around the room, representatives from dozens of neutral species watched to see how humanity would respond. Some looked sympathetic, others curious. A few seemed to be enjoying the show. Elena looked at each of the 7 Alliance leaders in turn. She had studied their species, their cultures, their histories. She knew that several of them had once been where humanity was now, young and expanding, until the established powers had forced them into submission. "Thank you for presenting your terms," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I have listened to every word and understand exactly what you are demanding." The Alliance leaders leaned forward, expecting negotiations to begin. In their experience, this was where the real bargaining started. The weaker species would plead for better terms, offer compromises, try to find middle ground. Instead, Elena turned to Captain Chen and Dr. Kim. "Pack up our materials. We're leaving." Dr. Kim's eyes widened. "Ambassador, are you certain?" "Completely certain," Elena replied, her voice steady and calm. "We're done here." Captain Chen closed his briefcase with a sharp click that echoed through the silent chamber. Dr. Kim fumbled with her recording equipment, her hands trembling slightly from nervousness. High Chancellor Vex rose from his seat, his silver fur bristling with agitation. "You cannot simply leave. These terms are final. There will be no better offer." Elena picked up her coat from the back of her chair and turned to face the 7 Alliance leaders one last time. "I understand that these are your final terms. And this is our final answer. No. We reject everything you have proposed." The unthinkable response. Matriarch Zora's scales flashed bright orange, indicating complete shock. "You do not understand the situation. We outnumber your species 100 to 1. Our combined fleets could sterilize every human world within months. You have no choice but to accept." Elena walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. She paused at the threshold and looked back at the assembled aliens. "You're absolutely right that you outnumber us," she said with a slight smile. "You're right that your fleets are larger than ours. But you're wrong about one crucial thing." "And what might that be?" asked Supreme Coordinator Nix, his form flickering between visible and invisible as his emotions fluctuated. Elena's smile grew wider, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that would change everything. "You're wrong if you think we have no choice. Humans always have a choice, and we choose to walk away." The 3 humans left the Grand Assembly Hall without looking back. Behind them, representatives from 7 of the galaxy's most powerful species sat in complete shock. They had planned for human anger, for desperate negotiations, for pleading and bargaining. They had not planned for simple, quiet dignity. Elena Rodriguez had just done something unprecedented in galactic history. She had looked the most powerful alliance in the galaxy in the eye and walked away without fear, without anger, and without compromise. As the chamber doors closed behind the human delegation, the Alliance leaders began to realize they might have made a terrible mistake. They had expected to negotiate with a desperate, inferior species. Instead, they had encountered something they didn't understand and couldn't predict. The human response had been polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its confidence. Elena Rodriguez had spoken like someone who held all the cards in a game the aliens didn't even know they were playing. In the silence that followed, representatives from neutral species began to murmur among themselves. If humanity was confident enough to walk away from the Alliance's demands, what did they know that everyone else didn't? The Seven Species Alliance had expected this day to mark humanity's submission to galactic order. Instead, it marked the beginning of a crisis that would shake the foundations of their power. The revelation. The blockade begins. 3 days after the failed negotiations, the largest military operation in galactic history began. Admiral Corax of the Moravian Imperial Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching as 7 different fleets moved into position around human space. The coordination required was staggering. Over 3,000 ships from different species, each with their own command structures and technologies, all working toward a single goal. "All sectors report ready, Admiral," announced Lieutenant Saris, a young Moravian officer whose silver fur gleamed with pride. "Human space is completely surrounded. No ship can enter or leave without our permission." Admiral Corax had been fighting wars for 40 years. He had blockaded rebellious colonies, starved out pirate strongholds, and forced dozens of species into submission. This should have been a routine operation. Surround the humans, cut off their trade, wait for their inevitable surrender. "Begin monitoring all human communications," Corax ordered. "I want to know the moment they send a surrender message." But hours passed without any communication from human space. Then days, then weeks. The silence was more unnerving than any desperate plea for mercy would have been. The strange quiet. Captain Zilla of the Hylian research vessel Scientific Progress was assigned to monitor human communications from the outer edge of their territory. Her job was to analyze human psychological responses to the blockade and predict how long their resistance would last. "Status report," she clicked to her communications officer. "Still nothing, Captain. No distress signals, no diplomatic messages, no emergency broadcasts. It's like human space has gone completely dark." Zilla's scales shifted to pale yellow, indicating confusion. "Check the equipment again. There must be some malfunction." The equipment was working perfectly. Every other species in the galaxy was communicating normally. Trade ships sent routine status updates. Military vessels exchanged regular reports. Civilian broadcasts carried news and entertainment across dozens of systems. Only human space was silent. "Perhaps they're using encrypted communications," suggested the science officer. "Codes we haven't broken yet. But even encrypted communications would show up on their sensors as carrier signals." There was nothing. Human space had become a void in the galaxy's communication network. The first disturbing discovery. 2 months into the blockade, Lieutenant Commander Vash of the rigid Union patrol ship Crystal Edge was conducting a routine surveillance pass near the human colony of Nuterra. What he found made him question his own sensors. "Captain Brim, you need to see this," Vash called to his commanding officer. Captain Brim's crystalline form approached the sensor station, light patterns flickering through his body as he analyzed the data. "These readings can't be correct. Run a full diagnostic." The diagnostics came back clean. The sensors were working perfectly, which made the readings even more disturbing. "The colony shows no signs of distress," Vash reported. "Population levels are stable. Energy output is actually increasing. Industrial activity appears to be expanding. It's as if the blockade doesn't exist for them." Similar reports began coming in from scouts observing other human colonies. New Geneva showed massive construction projects underway. New Tokyo had built what appeared to be entirely new industrial complexes. New Beijing was expanding its agricultural output at unprecedented rates. None of it made sense. A blockaded colony should be struggling, rationing supplies, sending desperate messages for help. Instead, human worlds seemed to be thriving. The impossible self-sufficiency. Dr. Malik Okonkwo sat in his laboratory on the human world of New Lagos, reviewing production reports with satisfaction. As the colony's chief industrial engineer, he had spent the last 2 months implementing protocols that had been developed years earlier but never used. "How are the manufacturing numbers looking?" asked Governor Patricia Santos during their weekly briefing. "Better than we ever imagined," Malik replied, pulling up holographic displays of production data. "Food production is up 40%. Energy output has doubled. We're now manufacturing everything we used to import from alien worlds, and we're doing it more efficiently than they ever did." Patricia studied the numbers with amazement. "These figures show we're producing more advanced materials than the rigid union crystals." "That's correct," Malik smiled. "Turns out their superior crystal technology has some significant flaws. Too much energy waste, too many structural weaknesses. We've developed improvements they never thought of." The truth was even more remarkable than the numbers showed. For decades, humans had been buying alien technology because it was easier than developing their own. But they had always kept the knowledge and capability to manufacture everything they needed. The blockade had simply forced them to use abilities they had been keeping in reserve. On New Mars, Chief Agricultural Scientist Dr. Jennifer Walsh was achieving similar breakthroughs. "The alien farming methods we've been using are incredibly inefficient," she explained to her research team. "They work, but they waste enormous amounts of resources. Our new techniques can produce twice as much food using half the water and energy." Similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of human worlds. Engineers were building better machines. Scientists were developing superior technologies. Farmers were growing more food. Manufacturers were creating stronger materials. The aliens had assumed that cutting off trade would cripple human civilization. Instead, it had freed humanity to reach its full potential. The growing alarm. Back at Alliance headquarters, the reports were causing panic among the leadership. High Chancellor Vex paced back and forth in his office, his silver fur standing on end with agitation. "This is impossible," he growled to his intelligence chief. "No species develops this quickly. It takes thousands of years to build advanced industrial capacity." "Unless they already had the knowledge," replied Intelligence Director Kral, an older Moravian whose fur had turned gray with age. "Unless they were deliberately choosing not to use their full capabilities." The implications were terrifying. If humans had been holding back their true technological abilities, then everything the Alliance thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The species they had considered young and primitive might actually be far more advanced than any of them. Matriarch Zora called an emergency meeting of the Alliance leadership. Her scales showed deep purple, indicating extreme concern. "My economic analysts have been studying human industrial output," she announced to the assembled leaders. "If these numbers are accurate, human colonies are now producing goods that are superior to anything available in galactic markets. If they chose to resume trade, they could dominate entire sectors of the galactic economy." Commander Thol's crystalline form flickered with rapid light patterns, a sign of severe stress. "But they're not resuming trade. They're not communicating with anyone. It's as if they've decided they don't need the rest of the galaxy at all." That was perhaps the most frightening realization. The Alliance had expected to force humanity into submission by cutting them off from galactic civilization. Instead, they had freed humanity from any need to participate in galactic civilization at all. The hidden truth emerges. Captain Lisa Park commanded the human exploration vessel, Horizon's Edge. Her ship had been conducting a deep space survey when the blockade began, leaving her stranded outside human territory. For months, she had been carefully making her way home, avoiding alien patrols and gathering intelligence. What she discovered when she finally reached the edge of human space changed everything the aliens thought they knew about humanity. "New Terra Control, this is Captain Park requesting permission to dock," she transmitted to the colony she had left 6 months ago. "Permission granted, Captain Park. Proceed to Dock 7. As Lisa's ship approached New Terra, she could barely recognize the place. The small trading post had been transformed into a massive orbital complex that rivaled the largest alien installations. More importantly, it was protected by weapon systems she had never seen before. "Control, what are those defensive platforms?" she asked. "New defense grid," came the casual reply. "Don't worry, they recognize your ship's signature. You're cleared for approach." After docking, Lisa met with Station Commander Robert Taylor, an old friend from the Colonial Defense Force. "Bob, what happened here? This place looks like it could fight off an entire alien fleet." Bob smiled grimly. "It could. We all received the same orders when the blockade started. Become completely self-sufficient and be ready to defend ourselves. Turns out when humans focus on something, we can accomplish miracles." He led Lisa to an observation deck overlooking the main construction bay. "See that ship being built down there? It's 5 times larger than any human vessel we've built before, and it uses technologies the aliens have never seen. We're not the same species we were 6 months ago, Lisa." The awakening. Similar transformations were occurring throughout human space. The colony of New Vancouver had developed energy shields that made their cities nearly invulnerable. New Sydney had built manufacturing systems that could produce almost anything from basic raw materials. New Cairo had created communication networks that were completely invisible to alien detection. But perhaps most impressive were the new ships being constructed in hidden shipyards throughout human territory. These vessels were larger, faster, and more advanced than anything in the known galaxy. They incorporated technologies that human scientists had been developing in secret for decades. Dr. Amanda Foster, head of Earth's Advanced Research Division, finally revealed the truth during a classified briefing with President Chen Wei. "We've been preparing for this day for 30 years, Amanda explained. "We knew that sooner or later, the established galactic powers would try to limit human expansion. So we developed contingency plans." "What kind of contingency plans?" President Chen asked. "Complete technological independence. Every colony has hidden manufacturing capabilities. Every system has secret defensive installations. Every human world can become completely self-sufficient within weeks if necessary." The president studied the classified reports with growing amazement. "These capabilities, if we had used them from the beginning, we could have dominated the galaxy." "That's exactly why we didn't use them," Amanda replied. "We wanted to coexist peacefully with other species. We held back our true capabilities to avoid threatening anyone. But when they forced us to choose between submission and independence, we chose independence." The Alliance's growing fear. As intelligence reports continued to flow in, the Alliance leaders began to understand the magnitude of their miscalculation. They had not been negotiating with a young, dependent species. They had been facing the civilization that had deliberately chosen to appear weaker than it actually was. Supreme Coordinator Nix materialized in the center of the Alliance Council chamber, his form flickering with agitation. "Our deep reconnaissance missions have confirmed the worst," he reported. "Human colonies are not just self-sufficient. They are technologically superior to anything we possess. Their new ships are faster than ours. Their weapons are more powerful. Their defenses are impenetrable." High Chancellor Vex slumped in his chair, his silver fur dulled with defeat. "How is this possible? How did we not know?" "Because they didn't want us to know," replied Admiral Corax, who had spent months watching human space from his blockade position. "They deliberately appeared dependent on galactic trade when they could have been independent all along. They deliberately seemed militarily weak when they were actually incredibly strong." The truth was finally becoming clear. Humanity had not been the aggressive, primitive species the Alliance had believed them to be. They had been playing a completely different game, one focused on peaceful coexistence rather than dominance. But by forcing them to abandon that peaceful approach, the Alliance had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They had turned humanity from a willing participant in galactic civilization into a completely independent superpower that no longer needed or wanted anything from the rest of the galaxy. The blockade continued, But now the Alliance ships were no longer trying to force human surrender. They were trying to contain a threat they had created themselves, watching in growing horror as humanity demonstrated capabilities that made the Alliance's power seem insignificant by comparison. In the depths of space, human ships began to appear at the edges of their territory. Not trade vessels or colony ships, but massive warships that dwarfed anything in the Alliance fleets. They didn't attack, didn't threaten, didn't communicate. They simply appeared, silent and ominous, making it clear that humanity was no longer hiding its true strength. The Alliance had expected to force humanity into submission. Instead, they had forced humanity to reveal that submission had never been necessary. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted forever, and the established civilizations were beginning to realize that they were no longer the ones in control.